योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर् गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So today we start with the next sutra, 3.43, which starts on a sort of a new sanyama and the corresponding siddhi. So the sutra 3.43 is as follows: bahirakalpitā vṛttirmahāvidehā tataḥ prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. So let us look at all the individual padas, all the individual terms in the sutra, in order to understand how it is constituted. So bahirakalpitā vṛttirmahāvidehā. So bahihi akalpitā vṛttihi mahāvidehā. So here there is something being mentioned known as the Mahāvidehā vritti, and Vyasa in his Bhashya will explain what that is, and then we'll understand that. So it is a technical term, and the Bahihi Akalpita Vrittihi is how the Mahāvidehā vritti is defined. But what is this Bahirakalpita vritti? Why is it called Mahāvidehā? That's something we will learn as we look at the Bhashya. Now, from that, the siddhi arises. So what is the siddhi? So the sutra says, tataḥ, from that, prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. So what that means is, there is the weakening and finally destruction. So that is kshayaḥ of prakāśāvaraṇam, that which covers the light of illumination. So the veil which covers the inner light, that gets destroyed, that gets weakened and eventually destroyed by this particular Mahāvidehā vritti, it says. Now this will also remind us of one of the fruits of pranayama when we looked at the ashtangas, which is tataḥ prakāśāvaraṇam. So the same words are used. Here it says kshayaḥ, there it says kshiyate. Those are different forms of the same word. And then prakāśāvaraṇam, that is used in both places. So that same covering of the inner light is which in the worldly state, where we lose the realization of the inner light due to what is known as a covering or something, because it is veiled, because of karmashaya, vasanas, etc. So that covering gets destroyed through this bahirakalpita mahāvidehā vrittihi. And that Vyasa will explain in the Bhashya. So now let's look at the Bhashya. Vyasa begins by saying, Sharirat bahihi manasaha vrittilabhaha videha namadharana. So, Sharirat bahihi, outside the body. Manasaha vrittilabhaha. When the manas, the mind as an instrument, when it obtains its state, avastha or vritti, its sphere of activity. So its state, its place is when it is outside the body, outside the physical body. That is known as videha. Now what is this videha? It says videha nama dharana. So it is a form of dharana. Once again, when we looked at the ashtangas, we saw the definition of dharana. It is desha bandha chittasya dharana. So when the chitta is confined to a specific desha, now that desha can either be a physical region in space, or it can be a specific object of cognition. So when the alambanam, or the whatever the chitta is cognizing, whatever it is knowing, whatever it has the knowledge of, or the whatever is forming the object of knowledge or understanding of chitta, which is after all an instrument of knowing, when that gets bound or fixed or tied, so desha bandha, where it is unwavering, when it goes into that condition, it is known as dharana. And we have seen that in great detail when we looked at that particular sutra. So here it is saying that when the manas, which could also be extended to mean chitta in some sense, but here specifically the term manas is used, when that obtains the desha, or it obtains a vritti, where it is a sphere of its existence, its being, or the locus of its cognitive activity, cognition, knowing, is outside the body. So sharirat bahihi, outside the body, manasaha vṛttilāvaha, that is known as videha. So that is a specific dharana known as videha. Now Vyasa continues further. He says, sa yadi sharira pratisthasya manasaha bahihi vritti matrena bhavati sa kalpitetyuchyate. So this particular condition, this particular dharana, if it is of the nature of sharira pratisthasya manasaha bahirvrittihi, or sharira pratisthasya manasaha bahirvritti matram, which means the manas, or the mind, is very much established within the body. However, its cognitive activity, or the sphere of cognition, is outside. That is something like the mind is very much within the body, but we are, let's say, thinking about something outside the body, like the sun and the moon and the flower and so on. It is similar, except that here it is not just thinking, here it is a proper dharana that is being mentioned. And yet, the mind is established within the body, but the vritti, as far as the dharana process is concerned, is outside the body. Because we have seen that dharana can very well be done within the body. We have looked at sanyama in the Nabhi chakra, in the heart region, etc. In those cases, the dharana, the region is within the body. Whereas here, in the case of videha, it is outside the body. But in that case, if the manas is still established within the body, sharira pratisthasya manasaha bahirvritti. So the manas is well established still within the body. However, the dharana, the object of dharana is outside, so that is bahirvrittihi. Then, sa kalpitetyuchyate. So that is known as kalpita. Now, the literal translation of kalpita is, say, imagined. Okay? So, or sort of brought about through thought, as though it is not entirely real. Okay? So that is a normal usage of the word kalpita. Here it is used in a very specific, with a very specific meaning as a technical term, where it says that if the dharana is of an object outside the yogi's body, whereas the mind itself is still established within the body, in that case, that is known as kalpita. And further, Vyasa continues, Yatu sharira nirapekshaha bahirbhutasya eva manasaha bahirvrittihi sa khalu akalpita. So now, in this case, he says, however, says Vyasa, on the other hand, sharira nirapeksha bahir bhutasyaiva manasaha bahirvṛttihi. So in the case where what is the nature of the manas and the vritti is, it is sharira nirapeksha. So as opposed to the previous case where the mind was established within the body. In the other case, he says, Vyasa says, where the mind has sort of broken all the bonds to the body. So the relation to the body, or the expectation of being within the body, being related to the body, being established in the body, has completely gone away. So that is known as sharira nirapeksha. So as though the mind is able to move or is moving freely, and there is no bandha tying the mind to the body. And in that type of a state of the manas, when the dharana is on an object outside, bahirbhutasya, so that bahihi vṛttihi, that is known as akalpita. So not only is the object of dharana outside the body, but the mind itself is not established in the body, has no relation, so to speak, with the body at all. Then that is known as akalpita. And he says with emphasis, he says sa khalu akalpita. So there is a certain emphasis, so that indeed is akalpita. So now we have seen this. So just as a reminder, we had seen Sutra 3.38 where we saw bandhakarana shaitilyat prachara samvedanachya chittasya parasharirāveshaha, where we saw that when the bandhakarana, that which ties the mind to the body, or ties the chitta to the body, once that is weakened, and when the yogi has developed an understanding of how the chitta moves about, then yogi can have the chitta enter someone else's body. So we did cover that when we covered that particular Sutra 3.38. So we have seen earlier also that the chitta can have a range that is completely outside the body and can move beyond the body. Now here, the state of the mind is, it is a sharira nirapeksha. And then there is a dharana happening on an object that is outside the body. Then that bahirvritti is known as akalpita. Now this is explained in the Rajamartanda vritti with quite nicely. It says, ayam arthaha sharirahankare sati ya manaso bahirvrittihi sa kalpite chicchate. Yada punaha शरीराहंकार भावं परित्यज्य स्वातंत्र्येण मनसः वृत्तिः सा अकल्पिता. So the way that it is explained here is, when the mind has a certain ahankara with respect to the body, which means there is a certain ahankritihi, the sense of self, of I, is attached also to the body. Okay, so this is when we say this body is me, so that is a sense of self associated with the body, which is also known as dehankara, etc. So when the mind has a tinge of that, and the dharana is happening on an object outside the body, then that is kalpita. Whereas when that sharirahankara bhava is completely given up, because it's saying yadi punaha sharirahankara bhavam parityajya, so completely given up, and the mind is moving freely, swatantrena manasaha vrittihi. So the vritti of the mind is such that the mind is completely free of any tinge of association with the body. Then it is known as akalpita. Then tasyam sanyamad yoginaha sarve chittamalaha kshiyante, it is said in that particular text. So when the sanyama happens on this, then the chittamala, whatever are the impurities, and that is why it says prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. So the prakāśāvaraṇa, the covering is of the nature of impurities after all. So all the chittamalas go away. Again, it is explained in another text saying, यदा शरीरं विहाय मनो ध्यायमाने बहिरधिष्ठाने वृत्तिं लभते तदा अकल्पिता बहिर्वृत्ति महाविदेहाख्या. So it is saying a similar thing. Shariram vihaya manah dhyayamane bahiradhisthane vrittim labhate. So when the mind is in a state of dhyana on an object that is outside the body, and the mind says that it has completely left any association with the body itself, then that is known as akalpita. Okay. So we have seen what is kalpita and akalpita. Now Vyasa continues. He says, Tatra kalpitaya sadhayati akalpitam mahavideham iti. So the yogi attains the akalpita, where the association with the body has completely gone away, and the dharana has happened on an object outside the body, like we said. So how does that happen? The Vyasa says, the yogi attains sadhayati. He attains the akalpita. How? Kalpitaya. So first, the yogi has to attain the kalpita, where the association of the body, of the mind with the body remains. And that is why it is sharira pratisthasya manasaha, it was said. So the kalpita becomes like a upaya. It is a means to attain the akalpita, which becomes a upeya. So through the practice of kalpita, one can attain the akalpita. And when that is attained, that akalpita is known as mahavideha. So tatra kalpitaya sadhayati akalpitam mahavideham. So that is what the yogi attains. So that is known as mahavideha, which is mentioned in the sutra. Yaya para sharirani avishanti yoginaha. So through which here it is referring to mahavideha. It is through this mahavideha. So it is through this mahavideha. What happens? Para sharirani avishanti yoginaha. The yogis are able to enter into other bodies. So that is what this mahavideha is, which enables the yogi to enter into other bodies, which was covered in 3.38, like we just said. So now we have seen what is kalpita, what is akalpita, and what is videha and then mahavideha. And also we should sort of also observe how there is a certain system. It is all, there is a certain methodical, there is certain means how these siddhis are attained, and how Vyasa sort of takes the pains to explain it to us, to the reader, as to how all this happens. And we can observe this throughout the Vibhuti Pada, where certain so-called magical things that we would think are magical are mentioned, and they are, and that is why they are known as siddhis. But Vyasa tries to go into it as a proper systematic way of elaborating on how all of this is working, given the underlying framework of what constitutes the manas, what constitutes the chitta, what constitutes the sharira, and what constitutes the karmashaya, etc. So through that understanding, these things are being explained. So the care with which all of this is being explained in the text is also something we have to observe. So continues Vyasa, he says, Tatascha dharanataha prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ buddhisattvasya yad avaranam klesha karma vipakatrayam rajastamo moolam tasya chakshayo bhavati. So he says, on the dharana, further due to the dharana, tatascha dharanataha prakāśātmanah buddhisattvasya yad avaranam. So this is also something we have to notice. Often when we say prakāśāvaraṇam, it is described as that which is covering the Purusha. Okay, that is an inaccurate description, because nothing covers the Purusha, so to speak. Purusha is ever pure. So what is happening is, the avaranam is of the buddhisattva. Therefore it is a buddhisattvasya avaranam. What is the nature of this buddhisattva? It is a prakāśātma. And therefore it is said prakāśātmanah buddhisattvasya yad avaranam. The Bodhisattva itself is a Prakāśātma when it is perfectly pure, even though it is a material entity, as opposed to Purusha, which is a metaphysical entity. So the material entity in its purest form, which is the Bodhisattva, that is of the nature of Prakāśa, because it is profusely with Sattva Guna, of the nature of Jnana and Prakāśa. However, that Bodhisattva gets covered. So there is a covering or a veil, which is V-E-I-L when I'm saying veil. So it is being covered or veiled by impurities. Now what is the nature of these impurities? Klesha karma vipakatrayam rajastamo moolam. So it is of the nature of klesha. So we have seen what is klesha, avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, kleshaha. So we had seen that, and each of those have been dealt with in a lot of detail. But they are actual impurities. Then klesha karma or all the karma and vipaka. So they are all the actions and their fruits and consequences. So that is also, we have seen what it is. The kleshas lead to karmas, which leads to fruition, which good or bad karmas, both will lead to some kind of a fruition, which will again lead to some klesha. So that wheel continues forever. And that forms this covering over the Prakāśātma, which is the Bodhisattva. Now, what is the nature of it? It is said Rajastamo Moolam. So it is rooted in the Rajoguna and the Tamogunas. So the Bodhisattva, which is profusely of Sattva Guna, gets covered through Raja and Tamo Gunas, which are the fundamental sort of entities acting in the form of Klesha Karma and Vipaka Trayam. Trayam is a triad. This system of Klesha Karma and Vipaka, which is the afflictions or impurities known as Kleshas, and all the actions, good or bad, which are all worldly, and the fruits through the karma theory leading to Vipaka or the fruition. So this triad constantly builds up what we have referred to as Karmashaya, which is all made up of Raja and Tama. So Rajastamo Moolam, this Klesha Karma Vipaka Trayam, that is the Avaranam, that is the covering of what? Of the Bodhisattva. What happens to that? Tasya cha kshayo bhavati. So, because it is the whole link or the association with the bodily system and the klesha karma, etc., that identity itself is broken, so to speak, as part of Mahavidehā. All of that which was holding that bondage gets destroyed. And therefore, Bodhisattva is independent, free, and in its original form as a Prakāśātma. And that therefore becomes the Siddhi of this Mahavidehā, which is a form of Dharana, as explained here. And that is the meaning and explanation of the Sutra 3.43. bahirakalpitā vṛttirmahāvidehā tataḥ prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ.
So we are embarking upon a very interesting sutra. The sutra is referring to prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. And as you just now heard, we refer to, or it was referred to us in pranayam section, prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. What is this prakāśāvarana? This is jnānāvaranam. Jnana, what kind of jnana? Spiritual, adhyatmic jnana. So, the adhyatmic jnana, to have a dawn in us, needs certain clearances. The cloud clearance is so important for Atmak Jnana. With lots of cloud in our psyche consciousness, there is not even a remote chance of having this Jnanam, or that is the Prakāśa, Atma Jnana. So, the cloud clearance is important. Now this Avaranakṣaya takes place. It means this Atma Jnana means it is again a Videha Vritti. Videha Vritti. This is what the spiritual touch does to us. One of the important signature conditions rather is that one is in videha vṛtti, ex-corporeal state of mind. The more the cloud within us, whereby we don't have Atma Jnana or not even a ray of Atma Jnana, iota of Atma Jnana, we are bound to body gravities. And that is called sadeha vṛtti, body-related corporeal vṛtti. But here the reference is coming to videha vṛtti, and that to mahāvidehā vṛtti, great excorporeal state or greatly excorporeal state, which is experience of a yogi and not of we mortals. However, we mortals can have sometimes a videha vṛtti, excorporeal state of mind. Now, imagine that if you are at a seashore, now not any seashore, a seashore where there is no inhabitation for some tens of kilometers, no animals, no creatures, no human beings. Imagine the seashore, because we are all used to seeing a seashore perhaps in urban areas or where there is human inhabitation. But in an isolated condition, in isolated land, if we are at seashore, it's a different seashore. Or even the sky. The sutra has reference to Akasha. And just now we concluded sutra which was called Akasha Gamanam. And we also considered the sutra which was referred to just now by Srineet, the Paradeha Parakaya Pravesham, where the yogi has a kind of excorporeal state of mind, and therefore he is able to go into Parashariram. He is not bound to his body. So it's a videha vṛtti. Now what is videha vṛtti should be understood figuratively here. Vigata deha vṛtti. Now this happens to us also sometimes, once in a while, that when you are at the seashore or you are looking at the sky, even looking at the sky from your own terrace is one thing, but looking at the sky in a very isolated area, say somewhere in mountain ranges where you don't have human inhabitation or movement for tens of kilometers, and then when you look at the sky, there is no urban light, illumination of nights, no urban hubbub, sound, noise, absolutely peace and quiet area, which is available outside the outskirts of an urban area. The sky is different there. For us, object of the sky is different when we are far away from outskirts of our cities and then look at the sky. Imagine the sky from a Himalayan mountain top, altitude of some 15,000, 20,000 feet. How the sky would be? It's already isolated area from all animate creation. There is no sound and noise of birds and animals and creatures and hubbub of human activity. The Akasha is different. So Akasha is also referred to an ethereal state. Etherealized state of mind is a pure state of mind. Now, what is this pure state of mind? One of the signature conditions is that it is videha vṛtti. Vigata deha vṛtti is definitely a transcendent state of mind. So, the videha vṛtti can be experienced by you and me here and there once in a while. As I said, from sitting on a seashore, the mind becomes magnanimous, mind becomes noble, mind gets etherealized, figuratively. So that's a videha vṛtti. Now here the reference is to mahāvidehā vṛtti. So basically, Videha Vritti should be understood how it works. What in simple words is called etherealized mind, purified mind, magnanimous mind. Then there are two ways. One is kalpita and akalpita vritti. In simple words, kalpita means imaginary, out of imaginations. It is the mind itself imagining etherealized state. Like many times we are etherealized in a, say, sanctum sanctorum of a temple, which is in an isolated area. It's a different experience for mind. And one of the signature conditions that we become vigata deha, we escape the gravities of the mind. And that is why we are in a sublime state. What is sublime state? One of the signature conditions is to be not sunk in the matter of the mire of body. One should escape. That is the videha vritti. And then it can be imaginary and it can be unimaginary. So if it is to be explained, the kalpita vritti is something like you are, say, in an isolated area, again at a seashore, and you are doing kite flying. When you are doing kite flying, the kite floats and flies in the air, in the space, but the thread is in your hands. The thread is in your hands. So the mind can be etherealized for we mortals, and we feel temporary and little escape from body gravities. We are in a transcendent state, not being arrested in our status and in delimitations, etc., our personality, personal gravities, etc. And that happens in your practice of yoga also, if you can identify such an experience and recall. So escaping body gravity is so important to be etherealized. And that's why it is videha vritti. Now, kalpita videha vritti means like kite flying, as I said just now, the thread is in your hands. So the mind might be going in the high altitudes of sublimity, ethereality, but still the thread is held by the body. So when we go at a seashore and have experience of magnanimous mind, noble mind, excorporeal mind, which seems to have escaped the gravity of the body, it only seems to be escaping, but still the thread is still held by the body. So that is something like kalpita vritti. We imagine, and it's an imaginary state of the mind that it is etherealized. The thought process is such that it etherealizes us. And then, like the kite is in your hand and you can quickly ground the kite by pulling the thread. You can get the kite down. Similarly, it happens to our mind. It is like kite, and sometimes it seems to be going into the space up, but the thread is very much in the hands. So the kalpita is something like that, which happens in empirical plane. We become etherealized, and perhaps we are again back to square one, which is the experience of we mortals. But then that is imaginary because it is empirical thought process that has given you seemingly an escape from body gravity, and therefore you get that unusual experience in your mind, out of box experience in our mind, out of world experience in our mind, but that is kalpita. And therefore, Patanjali is expressly referring to akalpita. So akalpita is only possible to yogis and not we mortals. We can get videha vritti, but it will be kalpita. And it is temporary. Again, as I said, it is empirical process whereby we are in a transcendental state. We can again come back to our original stasi, the normal state, and that's called coming back to square one. So our videha vritti will be coming back to square one. But Mahavideha vritti is something different, that is of a yogi. And in those sutras, if you recall, when we spoke about parasharirāveshah. There is weakening of the kleshas, the body gravities and the gravities of the psyche. There is a freedom from that. And therefore, yogi will be having Mahāvidehā vritti, great excorporeal state. While for mortals it is excorporeal state, very temporary, like a lightning, it comes in the sky. There's a lightning condition which comes and goes and gives us out-of-world experience for a while. So, kalpita Mahāvidehā vritti, kalpita videha vritti and akalpita Mahāvidehā vritti should be juxtaposed, and then we will be able to have some imagination about akalpita Mahāvidehā, which is only possible to a yogi. Now this is bahihi. That means that is how it refers to excorporeality. Sharira bahya. And that has been made clear by Vyasa in his comment, which you heard the opening statement, Sharirat bahihi manaso vritti labha. That is videha nama dharana, and therefore videha. So first is videha vritti, and which can happen to we mortals once in a while, like a lightning in the sky. But then for a yogi, also it will happen, videha vritti, but it can leap into Mahāvidehā and even akalpita. It won't be imaginary. So imagine you and me getting at the Himalayan mountain top. What would happen? Yes, we would be experiencing sublimity in us. But imagine an ascetic or a yogi who has a rich fabric of vairagya gets onto Himalayan mountain top. Something different would be happening, although of the same nature, but not of the same grade. Like we go to seashore and we become sublime, but a poet goes to seashore, something different happens in the sense grade. A mystic poet gets to seashore, something happens which transforms his life. Our life is not transformed by visiting a seashore. Although we experience a momentary change in us and out-of-box experience, out-of-world experience, but again we quickly come back to square one because it is like kite flying. The thread is very much held by the body, and therefore it comes back quickly. So therefore, videha vritti and Mahāvidehā vritti is to be imagined again to understand it. It's greatly greater than mere videha vritti. And therefore, Vyasa also first explains videha nama dharana, videha vritti. And then we have to imagine what is Mahāvidehā, greatly excorporeal. This happens to yogi, therefore we have to imagine. This doesn't happen to us. And something happens to us similarly, that's why it is called kalpita vritti. Now, with this Mahāvidehā vritti, that too akalpita. So akalpita means there is a great, huge factor of reality. In our imagination, the reality factor is not that great. And that is why we call something as imagination, because it is devoid of reality. Whenever something is devoid of reality, we say it is imaginary. So the kalpita vritti is imaginary. And therefore now this reference to akalpita vritti means it is having that component of reality to a very great extent. So yogi gets this sharira nirapeksha vritti, which is greatly different in grades and magnitudes than what happens to us. So for you to understand this better, let me give an example of, with the help of escape gravity, which modern man is aware of. Now, on the planet Earth, even if we take a leap and jump We don't escape the gravity, we again fall down on the earth. So why is it? Because there is strong gravity exercised on us. And therefore, to escape the earth, in space technology, they have concept of escape velocity. Unless they take recourse to escape velocity, there is no way to escape the atmosphere of the earth and gravity of the earth. So when even if we are having videha vritti, we are not able to have escape velocity to really escape the body. Because that's why we again come back to square one. But yogi who has this ability, just we have seen earlier Sutra, parashariraaveshaha, etc., akashagamanam, etc. So it's a different thing. So escape velocity, so we know what is the escape velocity of the earth. It is said to be something like 17 to 18,000 miles per hour. In that velocity only we can escape. You cannot be taking a vehicle which is going 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers per hour. It takes a leap, it comes down. It is not going to escape. That's not escape velocity. There is specific escape velocity to earth, which is around 17 to 18,000 miles per hour. So in the technology, space technology, they take that velocity to escape. But however, it is interesting to note that there are certain bodies, celestial bodies, if I don't mistake, and I rightly remember, there is a moon for Jupiter. And it has such a meager escape velocity that perhaps if you take a very long, high jump, possibly you will escape the velocity because the gravity is so low on that particular moon. So if you take a long run and take a leap upwards, perhaps you will escape the velocity there. It is because of the low gravity of the gravity force of that moon of Jupiter. But on Earth, it is such a heavy and strong escape velocity needed. So yogi, because of his lifestyle and because of his transmundane substance rich in his psychic consciousness, he has better escape velocity from mundanity, which we don't have, which we commoners don't have. So that's how, that is mahāvidehā vṛtti, means the escape velocity is small. Videhā vṛtti means escape velocity is great, and therefore we become excorporeal but quickly come back to square one. But yogi's case is different because his kleshas are weakened. So the escape velocity with reference to spiritual processes, the gravity exercised by kleshas, vasanas. So they are exercising gravity for us. So in case of a yogi, these gravities are very less, very poor, and therefore the yogi can leap into mahāvidehā vṛtti. And with that mahāvidehā vṛtti, naturally, body gravity escaped, gravity escaped, klesha gravity escaped. Naturally, the jnana avaranam would be destroyed. And therefore, the spiritual experience, spiritual knowledge, the transcendent knowledge would be setting in or would be appearing in a yogi's mind easily. We don't become spiritual by just having a momentary transcendent state on a seashore or in a sanctum sanctorum, the temple, or going to the hilltop and mountain top, maybe isolated Himalayas. Again, we quickly come back. It is because of very strong gravity of kleshas and vasanas within us. Now, if the yogi has to have this low velocity, escape velocity, the prakāśāvaraṇam must be reduced. Prakāśāvaraṇam means what is this? which is veiling the light of self, it is Rajatamogunas. It is mundanity. It is worldliness. It is tendencies. It is vasanas. So these are the clouds because of which we are not able to sight the internal light, the spiritual glow. So when the clouds are cleared, when the Rajatama gunas are cleared or they are destroyed, then only that light of the self would shine forth. So it needs that excorporeality to be getting this prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ. And that is what is being mentioned, and therefore you heard in the commentaries Srineet explaining you the kalpitā vritti. In kalpitā vritti there is a abhimana. What is this abhimana? It is that the thread of the kite, which is held by you, and then you are doing the kite flying. So how long will it fly? It will depend upon your will, how long to fly the kite, and you can pull it back as well. So it is vigata ahankara vritti. And yoga psychology beautifully speaks about and often speaks about the vigata ahankara vritti. We have seen during the chitta parikarma topic as well. Great pravrittis were explained, samvits were explained, asmita samvit was explained. Vigata ahankara samvit, that was explained. So it is the ahankar which is the thread. And that is why we mortals might fly for a while but come back again. Like we throw a ball in the air, it comes down again. It doesn't stay there. It doesn't go up and higher like a gas balloon. When a gas balloon, when you release it from your hands, it goes up. It doesn't come down. So the gas balloon, because of the gas in it, it is able to go. But if you just blow the air in the balloon, it will come down. It will come down sooner or later. In a very slowly floating manner, it will come down. And that's why there is a difference between ordinary balloon and air-filled balloon and gas-filled balloon. Why children enjoy the gas-filled balloon? Because if you leave it, it will go up. It will never come back to you. So this ahankara is something which makes the yogi's psyche like that gas balloon. So if it is released, the thread is released, you are going to lose the balloon. So the Vidita Ahankar is a way to get excorporeality, and you can psychoanalyze any such sublime state that you experience on a hilltop, mountaintop, and a natural resource or on a seashore, etc. The mind is sublimated. What is the signature condition? It is ahankara rarification. Unless the ahankara is rarified, you don't get that excorporeal state. You cannot be very, very blown with ahankaric air into you and then you will become excorporeal. Impossible. Not even as an exception it is possible. So ahankar is the air within us whereby we cannot really become vigata deha, videha. So becoming videha means vigata ahankar. And we do experience that our ahankar is rarified, and that's why we become sublime in a natural resource or in a natural condition, wonderful sublime beauty of the nature, or at the seashore. We escape our ahankar gravity. That is the signature condition of being videha vritti, excorporeal state of mind. Now this is great excorporeal state of mind, which as I said should be imagined. And therefore he beautifully explains kalpita, akalpita vritti are two. And what is needed here is akalpita kind of mahāvidehā vritti, and that is needed for spiritual attainment, spiritual realization, spiritual revelation. Because prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ would be taking place. So how this sutra is related to spiritual knowledge, spiritual process, is also to be cited. So the avaranam is of the nature of klesha karma vipakatrayam rajastamo moolam tasya chakshayo bhavati. So for the spiritual process, we need to understand as sadhakas, as mortals, basically we must escape the body gravity. You can't be holding on to body gravity or be held by body gravity and have a spiritual process in place. It won't happen. Vigata deha hankara is so important. And that's why the videha vṛtti is important. And then here there is reference to mahāvidehā vṛtti. And because of this, yogi is able to go for shariravesha, because he is able to escape from his own psychic consciousness gravities. And he knows the escape routes, etc. If you recall that sutra. So, this all happens because of spiritual evolvement by Rajatama Mula Dosha Nasha, or ratification of these defects. That is Kshaya. So the sutra is related to this, where we must take note of relationship between excorporeal state and then Vigata Ahankar aspect and factor in it. And the sublimity that comes is because of Ajnana, for a moment at least. We get rid of it. And that Ajnanam is Vigata Ahankara. It is spiritual kind of wisdom. And therefore, Vigata Ahankara is important. So try to figure out how this spiritual process is by the description that has come in the sutra and the similes and metaphors used to explain the sutra. So that's the prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ, which is sought after by a yogi. What we seek in the world is one thing, but what yogi seeks in a spiritual life is something which is called prakāśāvaraṇakṣayaḥ, jnana prakāśa, atma jnana prakāśa. That is what is sought by a yogi. And therefore he understands the importance of videha vṛtti, mahāvidehā vṛtti, akalpitā mahāvidehā vṛtti, and not just kalpita. Kalpita is a stepping stone. Not that kalpita vṛtti is not necessary. It is a stepping stone which Vyasa has made it clear. It begins with kalpita vṛtti, but then yogi can escape the mundane gravity. We don't escape the gravity, and therefore we come back. We come to square one. Yogi doesn't come to square one. He is scaling up the ladder of spiritual process. So very interesting sutra for understanding the domain of spiritual process. And that should be cited by we neophyte beginners here. Okay.
Okay. So we'll stop for today and we'll begin with the next sutra in the next session. So let us recite the shlokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vaiඥānikam pravaktrutva āsaneshu kalavidam yogābhyāse ca tattvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yoga vruksho hi lokesmin yat preranena varditaha yogācārya guro tubhyam sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.